أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So we have been studying an interpretation of the verse, and if a suggestion from Satan assails your mind, seek refuge with God, for he is all-hearing and all-knowing. This was the addendum to the 15th word. I don't have the book, so you can tell me the page number. Is it 200?
202.
202. So this is going to be the third session. We already did two so far. And we also studied this text in relation to what we were studying with Surah Abasa. It was in Surah Abasa, Qur'an was being mentioned as elevated. And the topic here is about when the author himself was listening to some Hufaz reciting Qur'an in the mosque, and he had this whisper-like thing which says, well, you think Qur'an is so elevated, just be unbiased and think as if it is speech of man, and see, still are you going to see it as elevated, as high? And he says, I fall into the mistake. And actually, when I thought about it as if it is speech of man, it became so dark. It was not sort of guidance, source of guidance anymore. So in there, he starts having this debate or conversation, internal conversation with Satan, saying that, well, this cannot be, what you're suggesting is not being unbiased. Actually, you are suggesting me to be exactly the opposite side, supporting the opposite claim, which is speech of man. So it is not being unbiased. You're tricking me. He says, okay, then be unbiased. Say neither speech of God nor speech of man. And then he said, it's not possible. There's no middle way between speech of man and speech of God. And then the arguments continued. So we came to, okay, then there was this other question. For last week, we said, next, the devil said, many people speak of matters similar to those in the Quran in the name of religion. Is it not possible, therefore, that a human being did such a thing and made up the Quran in the name of religion? And the author said, no, this is not possible either, because for the love of religion, somebody might say, the truth is thus, this is how it's supposed to be, and whatnot. But they wouldn't say, this is what God says, despite God saying so. Like you cannot speak on behalf of God for the love of religion. And then he take it one step further, and he said that if you take Quran to be word of man, then what you are in here implying is as if, although it is the criterion of truth, it's Furqan, in fact, it's full of lies, because its basic premise is it's a speech of God. If you say it's speech of man, then that means it has been a lie since the very beginning. So this is why, although you see that it has been passing the test of time for being criterion of truth, if you say that, oh, it has always been speech of man, then you are putting yourself into a contradiction. And I think this is where we were left. We were left at the fourthly. Did we finish fourthly?
We read it, I think, but we didn't
Discuss. Okay, we quickly read it. So let's start from fourthly. And we will need a reader. Atik, did we hear your voice anytime in the near past? All the time? Okay. Okay. We don't need to.
No.
Also, if the Quran is imagined to be man's word, it necessitates fancying that the Quran, which is a sacred commander of the community of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mankind's largest and most powerful army, is God forbid a powerless, valueless, baseless forgery. Whereas, self evidently, through its powerful laws, sound principles, and penetrating commands, it has equipped that huge army both materially and morally and spiritually, has imposed on it such an order, regularity, and discipline that it has conquered both this world and the next, and has instructed the minds of people each according to his degree, and trained their hearts, conquered their spirits, purified their consciences, and employed and utilized their limbs and members. To imagine it to be a counterfeit necessitates accepting a hundredfold impossibility. Such an impossibility entails the further total impossibility of supposing that a person who, through his deliberate conduct throughout his life, taught mankind Almighty God's laws, and through his honest behavior instructed humanity in the principles of truth, and through his sincere and reasonable words showed and established the straight way of moderation and happiness, and as all his life testifies, felt great fear at divine punishment, and knew God better than anyone else, and made him known, and in splendid fashion has for 1,350 years commanded a fifth of mankind and half the globe, and through his renowned qualities is in truth the pride of mankind, indeed, of the universe. It entails the impossibility of supposing that, God forbid 100,000 times, he neither feared God, nor knew him, nor held back from lying, nor had any self respect. Because in this matter, there is no point between the two. For if to suppose the impossible, the Quran is not the word of God, if it falls from the divine throne to the ground, it cannot remain somewhere between the two. Indeed, it has to be said to be the property of the very worst liars. And as for this, O Satan, even if you were 100 times more satanic, you could not deceive any mind that was not unsound, nor persuade any heart that was not corrupted. The devil retorted,
So let's pause there. Any comments about this one, this part so far? Because the topic is slightly going to change. Anybody want to summarize? That clear, or there are two? Any objections? Is it good?
Yeah. No.
No objections. Fine. Okay, so okay, here.
How is this different from the last point? They seem very similar.
We thought you would ask a question. So we read this part. So maybe that's the reason he says it's very similar, because it's the same page, actually. Like we read this part last time, that's what I remember. Yeah. Okay, so it's the same part. Yes.
Yeah, and also I think it's just expanding on the question that was asked earlier about like, can you really deceive this many people? And obviously, like the one that studied the Quran the most would actually not be deceived. And then the example is given, and it continues to be given, I think, throughout the fourth. Fourthly, yeah.
the devil retorted, That's what you think? I have deceived most of mankind and their foremost thinkers into denying the Quran and Muhammad. I replied, Firstly, when seen from a great distance, the largest thing appears the same as the smallest. A star may even look like a candle. Secondly, also when seen both as secondary and superficially, something which is completely impossible may appear to be possible. One time, when an old man was watching the sky in order to spot the new moon of Ramadan, a white hair fell on his eye. Imagining it to be the moon, he announced, "I have seen the new moon." Now, it is impossible that the white hair was the moon, but because his intention was to spot the moon and the hair was by the way and secondary, he paid it no attention and thought the impossibility was possible. Thirdly, also non acceptance is one thing and denial is something quite different. Non acceptance is indifference, a closing of the eyes to something, an ignorant absence of judgment. It may mask many completely impossible things, and the mind does not concern itself with them. As for denial, it is non acceptance, but the acceptance of non existence, it is a judgment. The mind is compelled to work. So a devil like you takes hold of someone's mind and leads it to denial, showing the false to be truth and the impossible to be possible through such satanic wiles and heedlessness, misguidance, fallacious reasoning, obstinacy, false arguments, pride, deception, and habit. You make those unfortunate creatures in human form swallow unbelief and denial, although they comprise innumerable impossibilities. Fourthly, also if the Quran is supposed it repeats, right?
Yeah.
Also, if the Quran is supposed
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the fourth, yeah. But the fourth one is going to be a little long. Yeah, the question was, or well, even before the question, there was a claim saying that, oh, Satan, even if you were 100 times more satanic, you could not deceive any mind that was not unsound and nor persuade any heart that was not corrupt to the idea that this is speech of man. But then Satan says, well, I already deceived millions of people. Many people think that Quran is speech of man. So how do we explain this? Because the argument so far was so strong. What he made as an argument was strong. But then Satan says, well, I already deceived people. So in a sense, how do you explain how still people do not believe in Quran and take it as speech of man rather than speech of God? How do you explain this?
Can I say something? Not a comment, but just to expand the text. So maybe my English is not good enough, so that's the reason I didn't get the thing. In the original, it's so clear. So with the third one, when he compares with non-acceptance and denial, in non-acceptance, he says it just, the ignorance, and then it may mask many completely impossible things, and the mind does not concern itself with them. So the idea is you don't need to use your mind. With non-acceptance, it's just ignorance. You don't use your mind. So it's not, something active. As for denial, he says it is the acceptance of non-existence. It is a judgment. Hence, the mind is compelled to work. Hence, you have to use your mind for denial. And then the next paragraph, that part I thought it was missing, like it lost kind of. So a devil like you takes hold of someone's mind and leads it to denial. So he says for denial, you have to use your mind because it's something active. But when you use your mind properly, you wouldn't deny because you would see the truth. So this is extra that I'm imposing. So he says for that reason, a Satan like you needs to take over their mind and lead to something else. For instance, like occupying their mind with something else, and so on and so forth. So it's like they need to use their mind, but their mind is distorted by Satan, and that's the only way they would deny. Good, please. Oh yeah, microphone.
I guess didn't he still receive, uphold the objective that he's able to deceive like that person into denying? Because I'm still like,
That's the part he says, you deceive people by just stealing their minds. We should discuss this, how Satan steals somebody's minds, but Satan steals their mind in the denial, and they trick them with denial. So in the original Soren Kar, you do like then you trick them with the denial. So what I'm trying to say, when we look at the people who actively denying things, they look like using their minds. They are contemplating, thinking, and so on and so forth, right? At least it looks like that. So here, author says, yes, for denial, they need to use their minds, but because of you deceiving them, they don't use their minds properly, right? He says, simply put, you steal their minds and trick them with denial. We can discuss this part. I'm just, this is not a comment, but that's the distinction I thought it was important.
I think there are 2 points in there. Devil or Satan was saying that I deceived the foremost thinkers into denying. Look, they're not random people. They're very smart people. So now, because author was saying that if you become 1,000 times more satanic, meaning more, cunning, still you wouldn't be able to trick anybody. It's so stupid. It's so clearly stupid. And he says, well, I tricked even the smartest people, not dumb people. Now, challenging the author's claim in here, saying that apparently the way you are laying it out, it looks like a huge contradiction, but smartest of people swallowed this contradiction. So what are you going to say to that? And now author makes a very important point about how come smart people wouldn't see such a contradiction and still claim that Quran was speech of Muhammad. How would that work?
And he is explaining it by saying that you are stealing their minds and tricking them with denial. So it's not a product of thinking. Again, let's discuss this part, but I think this is really important.
I think let's start from the first one. When seen from a great distance, the greatest thing appears the same as the smallest. A star may even appear as a candle. This is a very important problem. Like looking at a thing from very far, not being engaged with it. And then you say, well, it's very small. It's source of truth, but you're not trying to understand it. You're looking at it from very far as if you're just, you don't have any intention to understand anything from that. Looking from far means this. So yeah, for yourself, then it's going to be very uninteresting, very meaningless. So for instance, if I were to grab the, best of the physics, like quantum physics or textbook or something, but I look at it with the tendency of, look, what do they busy themselves with? As if I'm mocking it. Sometimes people have this tendency, right? I'm not trying to understand it at all. I say, well, those physicists, they know nothing. I didn't put any effort in there. I'm just standing myself so far away from this and then mocking them. So, of course, to me, it's going to be very meaningless, valueless. So looking from far to something very valuable. Because I remember giving this as an example to my sister was in language school, Germany, and her friend, her teacher was coming up with the argument that, oh, in the East, they're forcing you to cover your head and it's a very sort of barbaric culture. Islam is like this and that. So they were like not trying to understand Islam, like from Germany in a town within her comfort zone, whatever is shown to her in the media, she has a very strong opinion about what Quran is, what Muhammad والسلام, is all about. Looking from that far is just saying that, well, I mean, it's just nothing. So not trying to engage or understand. So this is how the author says, first of all, those people, those smart people, they take Quran to be very simple and written by a human being because they are looking at it from far. They are not trying to get into the Quran, understanding it, the prophetic life or anything. More so, it has been like especially after the Industrial Revolution, within the arrogance of the stronger state, because they have the upper hand in terms of power, like you already looking at the Quranic worldview from high. Like, I mean, those barbaric people's worldview is the attitude in there already. So looking from far, not trying to understand at all, yes, you can make them not see the beauty or the greatness of it. So this is number one. Number two, also, when seen both as secondary and superficially, something which is completely impossible may appear to be possible. There's some impossibility is going to be made acceptable to those people. And he gives the example of somebody is staring at moon, like let's say one day before Ramadan, is it going to be Ramadan tomorrow or not? The person is very carefully looking at the moon. And then some white hair is just coming down before his eyes. And he says, oh, I saw the moon. It is like the new moon. But actually it is a white hair. It's not moon. He sees something, sure. But what he sees is not moon. It's just hair. Definitely this hair is not moon, clear. But since he is very careful looking at something else, he is misinterpreting, misunderstanding what he is saying. So in his eyes, as if hair appears to be so surely like moon. So you are trying to look for something else. Your focus is elsewhere. And then you see some secondary thing, and you take it as if, oh, this proves my point, which it cannot. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that because we're talking about denial of the Quran, it sounds a bit external, like we're talking about, the kuffar, but actually this can also apply to us as, believers, that when you're looking at the Quran from a distance, when you're just like, oh, I'm Muslim, but you haven't really opened the Quran, haven't really tried to understand it, you're going to go through a same experience where you might not really deny it, but you're not going to have that connection. So for example, like I'm thinking of like also seeing things as literally far. So for example, if I feel like the day of judgment is literally far, it's so far, I don't see it, then in my life, I'm not going to act like it's ever coming. I'm going to act like, oh, tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to live this life. So I'm going to be focused on those things. And then I think the second example also makes me think of, believers and how we try to find things in the Quran to sort of bridge that gap with the secular world. So we're like, oh, I want to find black holes in the Quran. I want to find this in the Quran. So, and they do, because you see like all this jargon out there about how, like the Quran mentions the sun 8,314 times. did you know the temperature of the sun is 8,314 degrees Celsius? Subhanallah. So you see a lot of that talk. I don't know. I made that up. I've heard that though. Yeah.
I mean,
So, you do see that talk. So people are trying to find very much science. There is a guy who's really popular in Pakistan who does that these days. He's, talking about wormholes. Thank you. So it also applies to teachers.
So for this second one, I mean, although argument-wise it sounds nice, but any example that this is applicable that comes to your mind? The person is looking to see moon very carefully, and something totally unrelated comes before his eyes and says, "Oh, I found what I'm looking for. Moon is there." Any example within the context of what we are up to?
I'm thinking of it in the sense that if there's someone whose sole purpose they're going in to see the Quran for the sake of denying it, then of course they're going to find things that are going to be secondary and superficial, and then they're going to think that, oh, that just proves my point.
Exactly.
From that sense.
Actually, nowadays in Turkey, within the circles of social media and whatnot, there's some agnostic guy, and he is having some debates with apparently Muslim YouTubers. So one of the examples he gave was, I mean, I didn't have enough patience to watch it. I just watched the first few minutes. So
35 minutes.
No, just 1 or 2 minutes. So he was saying that, like in Surah Kahf, it says sun set into the mud. Like this is something he is using against, like, sun doesn't set into mud. Like your Quran is imagining as if sun is going to get into mud. We know with our scientific knowledge, sun is there, earth is here. Like, how come? So it looks like that person is willing to deny Quran as a message and looking for some sort of an excuse to put the finger on and saying that, look, like sun doesn't get into mud. Come on, if this is how Quran is speaking, then of course this cannot be speech of God, as if this is not even speech of man. It's so funny, sort of a thing. So if your intention is to look at it secondary, not trying to understand, and your main goal is to deny Quran, anything comes before your eye and you say, oh, I found it. So this is a missing point. And likewise, the same thing applies to prophetic life too. The person's point is to deny Prophet's life. And this same kid is saying, oh, Prophet, your Prophet got married with a 6-year-old. So another white hair, like, because the point of starting the conversation is to deny the Prophet's prophethood, and then lands on something and says, look, if this is the case, then since this is the case, not if, since this is the case, then he is such a bad person, evil person. How come he's going to be the prophet of God and whatnot? So this in here, I think the main focus is the person starts with the intention to deny, and then slight thing, which is totally unrelated, appears as a very strong evidence, although it is not. If we put everything into context, you're going to find a lot of meaning, what it means that sun is setting in the mud, or Prophet is marrying a 6-year-old. Like, these things would get into a very meaningful, and you would say, oh, there's this much wisdom in there. But since they are being looked with a secondary sight, it's becoming source of a proof for apparently smart people. Yes. You have the camera.
I guess I had a question about the author's claim. Like, I feel like you could have maybe this point is possible even without the claim of like saying the devil does not have the power to do this, but like there's a clear claim made, and I'm not still understanding, because like I'm still thinking the other, the last sentence, basically, you cannot deceive any mind that was not unsound, nor persuade any heart that was not corrupted.
Oh,
So he makes that claim, and then that's when the devil actually is like, yes, I can. Which I guess like isn't still, I have a harder time saying like, regardless of how it happened, it's still the result is the same in the end. Like they still strayed, they still are not believing. So does the claim stand then? Like, because, and I don't know if that was even important to claim other than to just go on and explain the 2 points. So I'm just having a hard time, I think, linking the
Okay.
3 things and why they're in that order.
Yeah, why did the author claim this,
Yeah.
although apparently contradicting himself? Okay. Say something. Yep.
I mean, I don't understand the question. Could you explain?
I can explain the way I understand. So in the claim, the question is, you cannot deceive anyone. So she reads it this way. You cannot deceive anyone. And then in the answer, we see that actually Satan deceives some people. So this is the contradiction, right? So, but the question, the claim is, it's not you cannot deceive anyone. It is you cannot deceive unsound, like sound minds. You cannot deceive uncorrupted hearts. And then in the answer, he said, Satan says, no, I do deceive. And author says, no, actually, you deceive people with unsound minds or corrupted hearts. This is what I understand.
If a unsound mind or a corrupted heart is a necessary condition for Satan to deceive them, why do we need Satan? They're already corrupted or they're already unsound. They're deceiving themselves. What is the purpose of Satan?
He's asking a serious question, but you still think, people still think it's funny because you always make funny comments. Remember the serious question, Steve?
Okay, so Sister Noran wants to make a comment. Let's see if we will be able to hear her. Go ahead, Sister Noran.
Assalamu alaikum.
Or
Regarding the point of how Shaitan deceives people, usually the other person is agreeing to that contract with Shaitan. He's not actually deceived. He wants to close his heart and mind to that which he cannot do or he's not willing to do. So maybe this is explanation of because usually there is a verse in Quran where Allah says like Shaitan tells human being disobey Allah, and when the human being disobey Allah, Shaitan will say, I'm innocent from your sin. So inni bari'un mink, So that's it.
yeah, Satan says, I don't have sultan upon you. I don't have authority upon you. It was your choice, he says. Okay, so what does it mean, Satan deceiving them? Satan deceiving them means there's a lie, so there's no truth. But the author's claim was that, but the lie that you present is so baseless that you cannot trick anybody. So that's why if a person's mind is like distorted or whatever, so a lie needs to come to get distorted, or Satan is representing a lie. So lie needs to be introduced, even if you have a crooked mind. An option needs to be there so that you accept it or reject it. So to your question. Like Satan is representing this false auction being presented to you. But even if the guy has a crooked mind, still he needs that auction. Okay, and I think Dartu's question was Dartu, are you okay with your question?
Yeah, that was answered.
Okay, yes, it was answered, right? Okay, good. So then comes the thirdly. I'll read it once more. This is the part Brother Birkan said we should discuss. Also, non-acceptance is one thing, and denial is something quite different. Non-acceptance is indifference, a closing of the eyes to something, an ignorant absence of judgment. Many completely impossible things may be concealed within it, and the mind does not concern itself with them. You're just being ignorant in this case. As for the denial, it is not non-acceptance, but it is an acceptance of non-existence. It is a judgment. The mind is compelled to work. So, a devil like you takes hold of the mind of a person, then leads it to denial. There should have been a paragraph here. So pause here in your understanding. I would like to put a paragraph there. And he gives a secondary explanation here. And showing the false as truth and the impossible as possible through satanic wiles like heedlessness, misguidance, fallacious reasoning, obstinacy, false arguments, pride, deception, and habit. You make those unfortunate creatures in human form swallow unbelief and denial, although they comprise innumerable impossibilities. Like he talked about many things in here as satanic deceptions. And these are very mundane things, actually. So I would like to emphasize what he mentions in there. Satanic wiles like heedlessness, ghafla, misguidance. So let me take dalala, fallacious reasoning, obstinacy, inad, false arguments, maghlata, pride, deception, and habit.
This is actually Görenek. It's almost like a culture.
Yeah. Habit, which is very interesting. Habit is a satanic deception, it says. Like for example, an example for this one could be like in scientific method, scientific community. This is how we approach things. This is our measure of truth. Like this is our style, unquestionable style. So, and you stop there because this is how the giant minds have been thinking with this. You're not having the courage enough to say that this doesn't make any sense, to step out of it. Yes, what do you think?
Another just an example. So for instance, when we look at, what is happening in Gaza and so on, it is so obvious now, even, the blind people, the different, the cultures and so on, they even see what's happening. But you still see some people still supporting, the Israel and having some arguments. It's not that they just, close their mind, the eyes and so on and so forth. They do, it seems they do have some arguments, right? Like the existential, the weakness of the Israel, the security, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter, the details. They do seem to have some arguments, like as if they are using their minds and so on and so forth. But at the end, that what they have is just, let's say, a fear of an Islamic culture. Like here in US, you talk to, let's say, a certain group of people, they would say, I stand with Israel for that reason, this reason, and so on and so forth. They do have argument, but you know that it's not about that at all. It's all about, they have this, let's say, obstinacy against something, and that's enough for them. Another example would be the nationality, like the pride, he says. And you look at the relationship between, let's say, two completely made up countries, like all countries are made up, right? There is no, let's say, any justifiable reason that this is one country and this is another country. Two made up countries, they have some strange relationships, and it doesn't make any sense. Why people, I don't know, in Pakistan would hate people in Bangladesh. I'm just making up. I don't know if there's such a thing or not. What is the point? You cannot find any, the reasonable thing there. But you would have this pride of nationality, and then you will come up with some arguments. They did this, they did that. We have this right, they don't have this right, and so on and so forth, right? So when you listen to them, they may even have hour-long, the TV program explaining books written, right? As if they are using their minds. But author says, actually, this Satan, it's just, they occluded their minds or stole their minds and just make them swallow this impossible lie. I think we can apply the same thing when it comes to denial of the belief. Because when they speak, we usually think that, oh, they say something very, reasonable, something intelligent. They have all these books, seminars, whatever, programs, YouTube channels. But when you listen to them, you will see that it's just either a pride, obstinacy, culture, and the use of mind is just on the background as if.
Also with pride, I can see another example in the sense that when like I mentioned earlier, that if you go in with the attitude that I'm going to deny the Quran, then even if you find something that tells you the opposite, sometimes your pride might not let you accept it. For example, if a politician loses the election but his pride does not let him accept it, he might bring up multiple reasons that, oh, like they mailed in ballots and stuff, or they did this. And then there comes a point where the pride it's so obscured for him that it becomes the reality for him. That's what he believes, that, oh, I did not lose and this happened. And I feel like that's my understanding of at least pride and how the Satan uses it to deceive or misguide people.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, then let's continue with the fourthly. Oh,
So I guess one thing I and Dara too were wondering was whether is it that only like that the devil is only using denial as a way to like deceive, because the way it makes it sound like like you have to use your mind to get like deceived into like denying the message, but it seems like non-acceptance would also still be a problem. So is it saying like that these are both two like modes of deception that can be like, it seems like non-acceptance to me is also like just as dangerous, because that tends to be like the prevalent sort of mode of like, oh, like your religion, it sounds interesting, and like, I accept that you follow this like way of life, but it doesn't concern me. So, we can like maybe learn a bit from each other, but like at the end of the day, you're going your way and I'm going my way. So like, I guess I'm having trouble understanding like what the difference between these two, like what's the point of like highlighting this difference?
So the way I understood it is the devil claimed that I deceived most of mankind and their foremost thinkers into denying the Quran and Muhammad. And I feel like that's what the author is trying to answer, specifically addressing the denial part. Like, at least that's my understanding of it.
But even the question is still important. I think we should discuss that. It's very relevant, not only important. Like most of the people I'm surrounded with at workplace and so on and so forth, they would have these attitude that you described.
And also it just seems easier to like you don't have to put in the extra effort to make someone deny if you can just leave them at non-acceptance and that's it, I guess. To me, I don't know. Now I'm like, I think trying to, I guess this is kind of just my imagination now, but like it seems like less effort to like leave someone in their like non-acceptance. Like they'll live according to them, a perfectly normal, happy life, like not going out of their way to deny, but also not like accepting it, just being quote unquote neutral. And like that's still a bad outcome for them. So like both of these two ways of thinking ultimately lead to bad outcomes. So why go the extra mile? I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, yes, definitely a better outcome for both. But more so, the way I read the text is for myself, because initially Satan is debating with me to deceive me. And now I am defending my ground. And now Satan is attacking with different things, saying that, look, you feel like your argument is so strong, because this was author's claim, right? My argument is so strong and you're being deceptive. And now Satan is as if saying that, look at all those people who are denying Prophet and the Quran. And even the smartest of them are denying the Quran too. You feel like your argument is so strong and you're the only smart one. How about all the rest? The author is saying that there are two types. One is most of them are ignorant. Yeah, they are apparently not accepting, or let's say, for example, today's Christians or whatever, I don't know, either haven't heard about Quran or anything. Technically, they do not accept messenger, which means they are denying messenger, technically speaking. But author says they are indifferent. They haven't heard about it or give a thought about it. So for them, yes, it's considered denial, but not really denial. Yeah, you deceived them, but for them, it's just by not knowing the truth, they are just denying it. So it's not going to strengthen Satan's case, because Satan's case here is that it's speech of man, and many people are supporting this idea. He says, no, they're not supporting this idea. They're ignorant of this idea, so I'm not going to take it serious. But he says, how about others, like all those famous smart philosophers? Now, the author is from there saying that author's initial claim was sound minds. And as Brother Birkan is emphasizing, you are manipulating mind or how the mind thinks. So I don't know, one of the examples that comes to my mind with this one is because I was astonished to see that sophisticated level of mind manipulation. So we were having this conversation with a friend, and he was talking about, look, you are having an opinion, and this opinion is your opinion. And Atik is also having something about it. Atik is also having an opinion about it. So you can never, since you can never get into Atik's skin, you can never know how Atik is thinking about it, how Atik is seeing it. So, and it looks like the conversation starts in a meaningful way. You say, yeah, okay, yes. I mean, Atik has a different vision. I have a different vision, but we are having a conversation. So we are trying to convert somewhere. Even if you think you agreed upon the same thing, still, you don't really know if he understood what you are saying. And I mean, there is this going, like to the extent the conversation took all the way to truth. You say, La ilaha illallah is truth. According to whom? Which La ilaha illallah? So it looks like the truth evaporated. So that person was using a very sophisticated way of thinking, apparently, but it came to so much so of a way that any truth evaporated so badly. So, which was astonishing to me, saying that, well, you don't live the life when it comes to feeding yourself. Water, you go and drink the water that I'm going to drink. So we agreed on that. We drink the same water. You are not pretending as if, which water? Maybe this is zinc. So according to, you go and drink the same thing from the tap as I do it. You know it's water. I know it's water. We are not disputing about it. But when it comes to some meaningful conversation, you start doing this mind manipulations. So I feel like in here, author is using a simpler terms to explain the same thing, but coming up with so sophisticated jargons or coming up with, I don't know, pride or different deception, or even to the point of habits, making it like, oh, this is our new style, then making it advertised enough. Anybody getting out of this way of jargon, this way of talking, is being discarded from conversation within philosophical circles. So author in this case is saying that you are distorting minds and how thinking is happening. This is how you can make those apparently smart people to deny it, because they have to deny it. They have to pass a judgment. This is why being agnostic is so easy, because you are saying that we cannot make a judgment. Fine. I mean, this is an easy way of saving yourself from trouble if you would like to deny. But if you are going to be an atheist, you have to prove your point. And author says, if you make such a point, then how come then those people, smart people, apparently smart people, are being atheists? Because the mind is getting distorted. Yes, Sister Nuran, try to speak up because we don't have a speaker and the room is not able to hear you well. Oh, I need to let you just a second. Okay.
Okay, salam alaikum. Regarding the tools of shaitan again, I think the most important way he uses with humans is pride more than anything else. And the consequences of pride will be denial and envy. Like, I think the starting point of conflict between the existence of shaitan itself was that he envied Adam for how Allah made other angels make sujood for Adam, and at that point he said, why not me? And at that point he was discarded from the mercy of Allah. So I think I think Islam has a very good uh, basis, and it is very difficult for anyone to argue. I believe so. It's a very strong aqidah. I don't know what is the translation of aqidah exactly, but it's a very strong belief, and the believers of Islam, they can, I mean, uh, they believe soundly in Islam. They are willing to die for it usually. So the point where when people deny it, it is partially because of the pride and maybe ignorance. The pride is a very important point, and the feeling of that they are not, Muslims, they are not better than us. Are they closer to Allah than us? They are not better than us. So why should we, also in the story of Qabil and Habil, the sons of Adam, where Allah accepted from one of them and didn't accept from the other. So this is where he started, where Shaitan told him you should kill your brother because he seems to be closer to Allah than you. So that was the point that I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan. Two comments here. Yeah, Natalia, please go ahead.
I hate going back to it, but I've been struggling with it, and I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. So again, Shaitan says, look at all these people that I've deceived. So I'm assuming these people are the disbelievers, right? And the author says, you're not deceiving all of them. Some of them just do not accept it, right? You're actually doing the hard work with the people that deny it, and even then they're not actually denying it themselves. You're holding their minds and leading them to denial. Is this am I understanding it correctly?
So again, put yourself in the shoes of this conversation, and what would disturb you? Like, for example, there are so many smart people and all of them are denying, or they are coming with a very strong conviction that a man called Muhammad made up this speech. Like today, if you go and ask Dawkins, for example, famous professor of biology and whatnot, like a guy, like he would be mockingly talk about Qur'an and Islam and the Prophet and everything. Like a smart guy, must be smart, apparently, that he had been a professor. So when you hear such a thing, how do you feel about it? Because here is another smart person, author, is saying that, look, here is a very strong argument. And what you're suggesting is any smart person whatsoever cannot accept this contradiction. Like if it's a contradiction, then, okay, just a second. Zaha, let him be. Okay. Let him be, just otherwise he will play with you. Okay. So if it's a contradiction, it must be a contradiction for any smart person. But look at those smart people. They're even mockingly arguing against Quran. So otherwise, if a person just denies Quran out of their ignorance, yeah, it's none of my business because that they didn't pay attention to. So it's not really going to hurt my conviction. Because my conviction is really based on arguments, a solid argument. So this is why the author is concerned about people who are denying and hence have to come up with a proof for their claim. And the author says, well, this is where the deception is happening. What they say is not really meaning anything in practice. The deception is happening in there. And Dua had a comment, and then
I was just thinking, I don't see indifference as like they didn't receive the message. I see it as they don't care. And I was thinking that even for that, it is still Satan, it is still those whispers that, could guide you to that indifference. And it could be satanic wiles like self-sufficiency or selfishness. So, for example, one thing that I'm thinking of, which is not related to the Quran, but it's about boycott these days. So some people are boycotting companies because they're like, oh, we want to take a stand. And there are other people who are like, we're not boycotting because, we don't want to hurt the economy of our country. Even that is against Islam, whatever. They're using their minds and even they are taking a stand. But there are people who are like, we don't care. We're just going to continue eating. We're, just, I want McDonald's, so I'm going to get McDonald's. And I feel like even for indifference, even for non-acceptance, you still have satanic wiles like pulling you towards that. So it is something that you should be alert against.
I hear a lot of silence is compliance. The comments are young people are shaped with these messages. Alhamdulillah, it's kind of good, yeah. One example when you talk about this guy, when you listen, the debates about the Islam, Quran, and so on and so forth, it's usually boils down to type of things that you gave examples, like, but your prophet did this, in Quran it says this and that, and so on. It's almost never, at least I never seen it, it's almost never about how Quran describes, the life, how Quran describes existence, how, the creator and the creation relate to each other within a Quranic perspective, what type of life a human being would pursue following Quranic wisdom and so on. We don't usually see such arguments or discussions. It seems this, the wise people having all these discussions, debates, and so on against Quran, but it's usually, something so childish or so, irrelevant even. So what happens, as author says, because the mind is occluded with certain pre-assumptions, biases. Oh, look at these guys from an Islamic culture, how they look like. Look how, I think they get dressed up and so on and so forth. So this Quran cannot be, the word of God. This is, on the background. But of course, when you see the discussion, there are some arguments, there are some reasoning, and so on and so forth. But again, never about how Quran describes reality.
I mean, this part had been very important at some point for me, like the thing that author is explaining in here, where he is distinguishing different types of denial, because I was feeling shaken by how many unbelievers out there. But author in here is saying that, well, denial is different, not accepting is different. And he says not accepting is not worthy of consideration when it comes to the numbers. But denial is something to take serious because that person needs to come up with an argument. But within today's context now, since he says this is undeniable though, so how come a person can come up with a argument, supporting argument, against what the author has presented? This is where the author says the mind is corrupted in this case. The method of thinking is corrupted, which then means I need to be vigilant. Because those people will come up with very heavy jargons with their titles and whatnot. And they would say, oh, this, look, bring a few sentences from here, a few sentences from there. Oh, yeah, Muhammad was relatives with Khadija's uncle. What was his name? Waraka. So actually, Waraka has written it and gave it. Like, we'll give you some sort of stories, and you would say, well, maybe is this? I mean, since he knows, he looks like he's giving some references. Oh, I haven't heard about this. Then maybe he is right. So this sort of thing starts creeping in. So deception is then going to take place as such. So then what that means is, because we already heard author's argument here, it's undeniably strong of an argument. So then how else the other side is going to be convincing themselves? Author says, read the fine print carefully. Do not take the methodology of thinking as if it's a sound way of thinking. This is what we have been learning since the beginning. Satan was saying that be unbiased, which was a deception. Be unbiased, meaning look as if it's a speech of man. So wait a second, this is not being unbiased. Likewise, be as vigilant for any sort of argument coming from here. Do not feel like everybody is seeking the truth honestly as you are seeking the truth honestly. There are a lot of deceptions are being put in there intentionally. So we have to be vigilant for that. So this is what I'm reading out of this. You have a comment? Go ahead.
So Imam Nursi mentioned that pride is one of the things that leads to denial of God. What kind of pride?
Yes, what type of pride? I don't know. I don't know when to take ethics seriously. So, will I take this as a serious question? Or...
That was a serious, serious question, one another. One after another, like.
So, what do you think there are to, since you take that question seriously?
Since you are a proud.
Two industries are just nodding, but I also had a similar question.
Where's the microphone? Okay, it's there.
The reason why I took it seriously is because I looked at like the part that applied to me, and when I read the habit, I was like, what kind of habits? So when he said what kind of pride, I was like, I had the same question for habits. So I was like, okay, sounds like a serious question to me. So I think it just fulfilled my own agenda.
Just to open up the conversation, I think that you could think of self-sufficiency for pride and how that would take you to denial.
So I will not try to answer this directly. I had an example in mind which is related. So I think we all have some idea of how arguments work and so on. There are some premises, and then you somehow put them together, make some operations on them, sum them up, and so on and so forth, and then come up with a conclusion, right? But in real life, what happens, we have hundreds of them. Like we have some premises, some conclusions. Based on this conclusion become another premise. They put with other premises together and then come up with another conclusion, and so on and so forth. Even when you have, like, you are educated person, you are very clever, you know how arguments works, you wouldn't, at least willingly follow a fallacy, and so on and so forth. Even when this is the case, like these clever people that we're talking about, or let's say Yusuf, you always have to question, the truth of the premises all the time, right? The way you put your premises and come up with a conclusion, the let's say mechanics of the argument is one thing. The content of the argument is another thing. If your premises are wrong, for instance, even if you follow the right methodology, to come up with the conclusion, your conclusion needs to be wrong because your assumptions and so on, the basic part is wrong. So why I'm telling this? So when we look at these intellectual discussions and so on and so forth, right? Or when we have such debates in our minds, we should remember that everything we say or everything somebody says rely on some assumptions, starts with some premises. Okay? And in most of the discussions, we see that some most fundamental premises are covered. So this is how, for instance, Satan works, right? They are covered. They are not discussed. They are not mentioned, right? So you, let's say, talk about the afterlife, let's say, and then how people need, like people needs about, you know, the everlasting life, our feelings, you know, the idea of judgment and so on and so forth. So when we will discuss it this Sunday, right? The 10th word? Yeah. So we will see that the author will start from the very basic premises. Like, for instance, how and why I have these feelings, right? He will start questioning these thoughts, whether I can have a certain feeling by itself or not, whether I can create these feelings or not, and so on and so forth. When we look at this denying, you know, the intellectuals or denying discussions and so on, we see that such premises are never, you know, discussed. Whether something can exist by itself or not is not being discussed. It is assumed that the things can exist by themselves, and all other arguments are put on top of them. Okay? So when you start such a, you know, the false assumption, the matter is eternal, or you know, there are such a law or such a preservation, you know, the constant and so on and so forth in the universe. When you start with such premises, you assume them, you assume they're true, and things can happen by themselves and so on. You assume all these. Everything you put on top of that, when you follow the right methodology of thinking, sounds like, you know, you're doing the right job. You are an intellectual person. You're writing all these books, and your arguments seems to be sound arguments. They're not fallacies. But the conclusion is the denial of there must be a creator. Even there are some intellectuals who think they prove that there cannot be a creator. So the question is, what is going on there? Because they are not stupid. The arguments they put, it's not the wrong from a mechanical perspective, let's say, right? They take, you know, the X, multiply it with Y, and say that it's X times Y, and it is true. But the question is usually whether X is there or whether Y is there, whether you can multiply it or not, whether you can sum them up or not. So all these pre-assumptions, why we have these pre-assumptions and why usually they are wrong. Now, Walter says, sometimes it's because of the pride. Sometimes it's because of the habit. So that was the question, what, like an example of habit. Like we have the habit of saying that the matter is eternal, right? There's no beginning, there's no end, matter is matter. The total amount of, at least if not one, you know, the instance of the matter, the total amount of matter is eternal. We have such an habit. That's the culture that we born in. or that we were educated. There are all these so-called scientific, the habits, customs, assumptions, and most of them are wrong. When you start with such wrong premises, even if you are an intellectual person, you won't see any problem there. And your conclusion will look like a sound conclusion, but because of the wrong premises, and you will have many of them, your conclusion will be wrong.
And for, like, let's say, since I gave the example of Dawkins is a biology professor. He might know biology well, but he makes a statement about theology, like about God. Like, and he feels very confident about that. Like, if I was talking about biology with him, he has the right to look from like high towards me, because he's a elevated person in his knowledge, and he's looking at me towards some higher, like mukabara. The word mukabara means like pride. In this case, is coming from taking him as greater. In biology, he's greater than me, sure, but he feels he is greater than me or anybody else when it comes to making a comment about the existence of God too. This is pride in there. Like, where do you have this greatness, and as if I can talk about anything and everything? This is a problem. Like, that pride, yes, your studies gives you authority to talk about biology within your domain, again, not in any domain of biology for sure, with whatever his expertise is. But there are many such smart people who are relying on their degree. And that's why, for example, I feel uneasy when people call me in discussion environment Dr. Yusuf, because my doctorness doesn't have anything to do in this room. Like, in this yes department, yes, I am a doctor in there, and it makes sense to call me as doctor in there. But in here, this title doesn't mean anything. But if I speak here with the authority of such a title and say that, of course, what I say is correct, this is pride. And it is being used a lot. Like, people of titles will keep using their authority on totally unrelated areas. And just another anecdote for what Brother Birkan said, Qur'an keeps talking about this. This is how we have seen our forefathers doing. This is habit. In today's world, what is the forefathers? The scientific methodology. We do not question, as Brother Birkan said, preservation of matter, preservation of energy. Like, of course it is. It's the law. This is how it is. Without questioning these, if I keep building arguments on top of that, yes, I will end up arriving to conclusions which are nonsensical. So the premises are wrong, but the premises are habit, became habit. So this is what habit in this regard refers to, and using Quranic terminology, it means this is how we have seen our forefathers doing. Yes, a comment there. Microphone is there.
When Atik asked the question of what kind of pride, I was thinking all sorts of pride. Like, what do you mean? But then when Durartu asked the question of what kind of habits, I thought, oh, what kind of habits are you talking about? Because we've heard of habits in the sense of good habits, bad habits. But with pride, it's such a negative word that we immediately think of pride as a bad thing. But with habits, it's like, oh, like you also have some good habits. But I was thinking about it, and with pride, you're associating partners with God. So if you're proud of yourself, you did something amazing. If you're proud of your daughter did something amazing. So you're distributing credit. You're giving credit to your daughter or yourself when you're supposed to give it to Allah. But then when I was thinking of habits, I was also thinking, even with good habits, you're doing something mindlessly. There is no mindfulness in there. You're getting up every day at 9 a.m. Great.
Why are you doing that? Are you doing that just because, oh, I've been used to this for like 20 years. I'm used to, having a disciplined lifestyle? Or is there actually a greater purpose in there? Are you doing it for Allah? Are you doing it in the name of Allah? Or are you doing it in the name of discipline or yourself or your military lifestyle? So even good habits in there can be deceptive and can, take you towards shaitan.
So, and just the beginning of the sentence was, if I just take this part of it, habit allows showing the false as truth and impossible as possible, which means if something becomes a habit in an environment, right will sound like wrong to you, because enough number of people repeated it enough number of times so that you do not question it any further, and it's being an accepted upon truth within your circle, and it became like, oh yeah, this is how it is. So this is why, again, this part is inviting us to question the tenets of thinking as it's coming to us from, especially when Qur'an is considered, the Western philosophy is attacking towards Qur'an, or now the scientific world is attacking towards Qur'an. Why do I take it as positive sciences? Unquestionable truth. Is it unquestionable truth, really? And as we have been discussing in these discussions, author is really attacking the very tenets of this thought process.
So another addition to that, like, yes, we cannot take anything as undeniable truth, but sometimes also, even when something is true, it doesn't mean that the relationship between this true and the link you make with the conclusion is necessary or makes sense. What I'm trying to say is, one example, I was like, every time there's a death in my work environment and so on, there are these emails, and if I know the person, usually make a comment questioning, isn't that interesting that somebody's death, it's not existing anymore, and quote unquote, from certain worldview, from certain, like a naturalistic worldview, the person no more, right? It's not there anymore. Isn't that interesting that a person is not there and you have some feelings like sadness for something not even existing? Like, you feel sad for what? Like something non-existent. Isn't that interesting, right? In a, let's say, more friendly way, I ask this question, not such a mechanistic. Sorry? Doesn't matter. So sometimes answer is, more reasonable. Sometimes answer would be talking about memory, neural system, the firing in the brain, and so on and so forth. So let's assume everything they say about how brain works, how memory works, and so on is right. But it's not relevant. So my question is, you have a feeling about something, someone doesn't exist. Isn't that, a kind of contradiction within your belief system that I'm questioning? And the answer is about the neural system. So we see similar stuff, like you question one thing, the answer is about, I don't know, how biology works, how physics works, atoms, and so on and so forth. Even if we assume that everything you say is true, let's say there's no mistake there, but how you use this truth is wrong. This is the distorted part. It's irrelevant. I ask how something can exist. Like, this exists. Can you explain how it exists? and you give me all the equations about how atoms works, how fluctuations in the quantum vacuum works, and so on and so forth, it's irrelevant. Like I'm asking one thing and you're giving me hundreds other things that I have to ask the same question for them too. So it's not about what you say is wrong. It's not about you are using a childish, the argument and so on and so forth. Because of the habits or because of some other biases, because of some pride, I don't know, ghafla maybe, you think what you say explains what I ask. Or within yourself, you have a question and you think this is the answer, but it's not. It doesn't work there. So just being intellectual, just being, the wise, or just having a truth in your hand doesn't mean everything you say is true.
So we have 3 minutes left. We have fourthly left. I am not sure if it's going to make a full discussion for next week. What shall we do? And we have one hand up to take a comment from online. So I'll go with the comment online with the remaining 3 minutes. Sister Saira, and I will appreciate being concise because the room is not going to be able to hear you well. So let's try to speak a little loud. Let me see. Yep. Okay. No. Okay, maybe she's not there. Anyways, then shall we read fourthly once? And if it's clear, then we will go to our next topic next week. Otherwise, if you feel like it's worthy to discuss, we can rediscuss it next week. According to author, it's so clear.
Fourthly, also, if the Quran is supposed to be the word of man, it necessitates imagining to be its opposite. A book that has self-evidently guided the purified, veracious saints and spiritual poles who shine like stars in the heavens of the world of mankind, has continuously instructed all levels of perfected men in truth and justice, veracity and fidelity, faith and trustworthiness, and has ensured that the happiness of this world and the next through the truths of the pillars of faith and the principles of the pillars of Islam, a book that through the testimony of its achievement is of necessity, veracious and pure, genuine truth and absolutely right and most serious. It necessitates imagining, God forbid, that it comprises the opposites of these qualities, effects and lights, and not only is a collection of fabrications and lies, but also a frenzy of unbelief that would shame even the sophists and the devils and cause them to tremble. The impossibility necessitates the further, most ugly and abhorrent impossibility that the person who, according to the testimony of the religion and Sharia of Islam that he proclaimed, and the extraordinary fear of God and pure sincere worship that he demonstrated throughout his life, and as necessitated by the good moral qualities unanimously witnessed in him, and according to the affirmation of the people of truth and perfection whom he raised, was the most believing, the most steadfast, the most trustworthy, and the most truthful, was, God forbid, and again, God forbid, without faith, that he was most untrustworthy, did not fear God, nor shrink from lying. To imagine this necessitates imagining the most loathsome form of impossibility and perpetrating the most iniquitous and vicious sort of misguidance. In short, as is stated in the 18th sign of the 19th letter, the common people who gain an understanding of the Quran's miraculous nature by listening to it say, if I were to compare the Quran with all the other books I have listened to, or with all the other books in the world, it would resemble none of them. It is not the same as them in either kind or degree. The Quran then is either superior to all of them or inferior to all of them. It is impossible that it is inferior, and no enemy or the devil even could say that. In which case, the Quran is superior to all other books and is therefore a miracle. In just the same way, we say, according to the categorical proof called residue, taken from the scenarios of method and sciences of method and logic, O Satan and O disciples of Satan, the Quran is either the word of God, come from the supreme throne of God in his greatest name, or God forbid, and again God forbid, it is a human forgery fabricated on earth by someone without belief who neither feared God nor knew him. In the face of the above proofs, O Satan, you can neither say that, nor could you said, nor could you have said it, nor will you be able to say it in the future. Therefore, the Quran is the word of the creator of the universe, because there is no point between the two. It is impossible and precluded that there should be. And we have proved it most clearly and decisively, and you have seen it and heard it. In the same way, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is either God's messenger and the highest of the prophets and the most superior of creatures, or God forbid, he has to be imagined to be someone without belief who fell to the lowest of the low, because he lied concerning God and did not know God and did not believe in his punishment. Relying on the fact that the Quran mentions the unbelievers' blasphemies and obscenities in order to refute them, trembling, I too have been compelled to use these expressions in the form of impossibilities, to demonstrate the total impossibility and complete worthlessness of the blasphemous ideas of the people of misguidance. And as for this, O devil, neither you nor the philosophers of Europe or the hypocrites of Asia on whom you rely could say it. Neither could you say it in the past, nor shall you be able to say it in the future, for there is no one in the world who would listen to it and accept it. It is because of this that most corrupting of those philosophers and the most lacking in conscience of the hypocrites even admit that Muhammad the Arabian was very clever and was most moral and upright. Since the matter is limited to these two sides, and the second one is impossible, and no one at all claims it to be true, and since we have proved with decisive arguments that there is no point between them for sure and of necessity, in spite of you and your party, Muhammad the Arabian was the messenger of God and the highest of the prophets and the best of all creatures. Upon him be blessings and peace to the number of angels and jinn and men.
Just two anecdotes I would like to add here. I think these last two paragraphs is a interpretation also of قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. So in قُلْ يَا الْكَافِرُونَ, what does the Creator take us to take a stand? So say to the kafirun, the denier, neither you have like قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُّمْ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, back and forth. So in here the author is saying that neither you have been able to prove this, nor you will ever be able to prove it, nor you will in the future, in the past, no way. So in Surah Kafirun, Quran is inviting us to have this firm stand before the denier of truth, saying that no, there is no commonality between what I believe and what you're believing. It's so distinct. And in here, the author is saying that the claim that you're coming out with, like if you are saying, you can either say Muhammad ﷺ is the messenger of God, or he is the worst of the liars. There's nothing in between. And with all good characters he demonstrated, you are even saying that he was a good man trying to convert his society to goodness, then you can never say he was a liar. Therefore, he must have been the prophet, messenger of the Creator. So there is no common ground, there is no similarity. So have a steadfast position saying that, oh, deniers, this is your point, this is my point, and your point is clearly nonsensical. So there's only one option that is left behind. So you have to come here. And the author is, by making this very stark difference, and as he says in the footnote, by fearing to, because he is using such a strong language, but he says this is really the case. And Quran is making things as stark. This is how he is saying that by taking courage from the language of Quran, but either prophet is messenger of Allah, or he is the worst of the worst of the worst of the liars. Quran is either speech of God and the source of truth, absolute truth, or it is the biggest compilation of lies on earth. It cannot be, oh yeah, some good intentioned people have written some nice text to give moral values to some barbaric people. You cannot say that. There's no middle ground. So this is why this whole chapter is also written in the style of Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun. And as we have been studying Qul Ya Al-Kafirun at Pen 2, so take a stand. This is what Surah Kafirun tells us. Take a stand to have this stark black and white distinction in your world in terms of truth and falsehood. Because truth and falsehood are that stark difference. But it is being depicted sometimes as, oh no, we should come into common ground, respect each other and whatnot. What is it that I'm going to respect? This is a total lie what you're suggesting me. It is an insult to the truth itself. If you're right, then Quran is full of lies. Otherwise, Quran has to be the source of truth, and you are a total liar. This is why once somebody was mentioning some agnostic person, still agnostic, but talking about good messages of Quran. And some religious guy was sharing that person's TEDx talk and saying that, look, they are even appreciating Quran and whatnot. Like this person is agnostic, which says God is, well, I cannot make a statement about God existing, not existing. Then how are you going to read Quran? If you do not need it as speech of God, how are you going to read it? Then you will read it as speech of man, which means you're reading it as full of lies. Like you are within this contradictory world. And that very same person has written a book about prophet, like the person who is agnostic, meaning not abstaining from making a statement about God's existence, is writing a book about God's prophet. Like, what a contradiction. Actually, what a hypocrisy. Because per your position, you don't take that person as a prophet. You're taking him as a liar. Yet you are saying that he was a good moral person. Like, what sort of a contradiction in there? And people tend to read such person, and since that person is using nice language about prophets' qualities and this and that, and then apparently objectively making a criticism about the prophet. And I should say, well, wait a second. From the very beginning, you were not supposed to say a single word about the prophet because you are already at the other side. So this is what Qul Ya al-Kafirun highlighting us to be black and white clear about where you stand. So I think with that, maybe we can conclude this text. Inshallah, next week we will start another part, which will be about what Daratu was.
Daratu was you showed it down.
No, Daratu was asking about which habits. Which,
Oh, okay.
I mean, from there I will, inshallah, intending another topic about that.
Very quick question.
Yes.
Very quick question. Okay.
If Satan isn't deceiving anybody, right, he doesn't have the power to do that or ability. And we find ourselves falling into his deceptions, due to our own corrupted hearts and heedless minds. How might that be cured?
Might that be cured?
Okay, inshallah, keep that question for a future. How are we going to not fall into deceptions of Satan? سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين